All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a look at Simon Sinek's Start with Why.
Oh, a classic.
It is. And it's all about, well, how great leaders inspire action by talking about why they do things, not just what they do.
It's powerful stuff.
And we're going to unpack why that is. Sinek uses this great example of the Wright brothers. And, I never thought about it this way, but
Right.
they weren't the only ones trying to get a plane off the ground back then, were they?
Not at all.
Hmm.
You had Samuel Langley. This guy had money, connections, government support. I mean, everything you could possibly want, right?
He seemed to have it all, and yet he failed where the Wright brothers, these bicycle mechanics, they actually succeeded. What made the difference?
Well, that's exactly what Sinek digs into. He argues that it all comes down to their why. The Wright brothers were driven by this deep belief in changing the world with flight.
They had a vision.
Absolutely. While Langley was seemingly more focused on fame and fortune.
So their motivation, their why, fueled their success. Okay, I'm hooked. So how does this golden circle thing that Sinek talks about, how does it all fit in?
Right, the golden circle. This is his model for how inspiring leaders and companies communicate. It's made up of 3 levels. What, how, and why.
Okay, break it down for me.
Sure. So most companies, they start with what they do. The products they sell, the services they offer. It's the easy stuff.
Like, we make computers or we deliver packages.
Exactly. Then they move on to how they do it. Maybe they talk about what makes them unique, what sets them apart from the competition.
Faster delivery, better quality, sleeker designs.
Yep, all that. But very few companies actually talk about their why. And this is the core. Their purpose, their cause, the belief that drives everything they do.
And Sinek's saying this is what truly resonates with people.
It's the most powerful level of communication because it connects on an emotional level.
Okay, I need an example. I think Apple always comes up when people talk about start with why, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're a textbook case. I mean, they have this incredibly loyal following. People love Apple.
I mean, people stand in line for hours to get the new iPhone. What's the deal with that?
It's because they've nailed their why. Apple's all about challenging the status quo, empowering the individual. Think about that Think Different campaign.
Oh, yeah, those iconic ads.
It wasn't about specs or features. It was about aligning themselves with people who dared to change the world. Visionaries, rebels, the ones who thought differently.
Right, and it worked. I mean, other companies were making computers back then, good computers.
Right. But Apple captured people's imaginations.
Their why gave their products meaning.
Exactly. It was more than just a computer. It was a statement.
So is Sinek saying that companies should just, shout their why from the rooftops, plaster it all over their marketing?
Not exactly. It's more about having that clear why at the heart of everything you do. It should be evident in how you design products, treat your employees, even the partners you choose. Remember that U2 iPod?
Way back when. I kind of remember that. What was the point of that, though? They're a computer company.
But it illustrates their why perfectly. U2, they're known for pushing boundaries, being different.
Sure.
It wasn't a random partnership. It was a statement about who Apple was as a company.
They put their money where their mouth is? Okay, that makes sense. So what about those companies that just don't get it right? What happens then?
Well, look at Dell. They were a computer giant.
Yeah.
Back when MP3 players were taking off, they tried to get a piece of the action.
I remember those Dell DJ players. Didn't really catch on, did they?
Nope. And Sinek argues it's because they focused on what they were already known for, computers.
So they just slapped their logo on an MP3 player and hoped for the best.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But consumers couldn't connect with their why because it wasn't clear. They didn't stand for anything in that market.
Okay, so we've talked about companies, but how does all this golden circle why stuff, how does it apply to us, like our brains?
Right. That's where it gets really interesting. Sinek says that we don't make decisions in the rational, logical part of our brains.
We don't.
Nope. Decisions happen in the limbic system. That's the part that controls emotions.
So we're driven by feelings.
To a large extent, yeah.
That explains some things.
Right. We often make decisions based on how they make us feel. And then later, we try to justify them with logic.
That's so true. It's like that gut feeling you get. You just know something's right, even if you can't explain it.
Exactly. And companies that tap into those feelings, that's when they really win us over.
Because they're speaking to our hearts, not just our heads.
Exactly. And that's where that strong connection, that loyalty comes from.
Like choosing a particular airline because you know they treat their employees well, even if it's not the cheapest or most convenient option.
Precisely. You're making a decision based on your values.
Okay, so we have this golden circle, our emotional brains running the show. How do these ideas, this start with why stuff, how does it spread?
That's where the law of diffusion of innovations comes in. Basically, it explains how new ideas get adopted by different groups.
Okay, I'm listening.
So you have your innovators, right? These are the people who jump on something new right away.
The ones who aren't afraid to try anything.
Exactly. They're the guinea pigs.
Ugh.
Then you have your early adopters. They see the potential and they really champion the idea.
You get other people excited about it.
Yes. And that leads to the early majority, who are a little more cautious but eventually come around. Then you have the late majority, and finally the laggards, who are always the last to adopt.
So Sinek argues that reaching that tipping point where the early majority starts to embrace the idea, that's what leads to mass market success.
Right. And to get there, you need to inspire those early adopters. They're the key. They're the ones who influence everyone else.
So it's not just about marketing, it's about creating a movement.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the why and how it spreads, but what about those tangible things like logos? They're everywhere. Are they more than just designs?
Think about this. A Harley-Davidson tattoo.
Okay.
It's not just a logo. It's a symbol. It represents a whole lifestyle, a community, people who share a set of values and beliefs.
Wow. Yeah. It's way more than just a motorcycle brand.
Exactly. And that's what a logo becomes when it stands for something people believe in. It becomes a symbol of their why.
So it's a shortcut to connect with people's emotions.
Right. And that's incredibly powerful.
Fascinating. This is all great stuff, but what happens when a company, starts to grow and that initial spark, that clear why they had, what happens if it starts to fade?
Sinek calls that the split. As companies get bigger, things get more complex, the founder might not be as involved, and the original why can get lost.
So it's not enough to just define your why once.
You have to actively nurture it, protect it, especially as you grow.
Because if you lose sight of it, what happens?
Well, you risk becoming just another company chasing profits instead of purpose. And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Ooh, cliffhanger. All right, so you'll have to join us for part 2 to find out what happens when companies forget their why. But in the meantime, start thinking about your own why.
What drives you? What makes you tick?
What gets you out of bed in the morning? Think about it. And we'll be back soon to dive even deeper into Start With Why. Welcome back to our deep dive into Start With Why. Last time we were talking about the split, when companies kind of lose their way as they grow and forget their original why.
Yeah, it's a common problem.
Yeah.
They get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
So how do they avoid that? How do companies stay true to their why even as they, get bigger and things get more complex?
Sinek talks about a few key strategies. One is constantly reinforcing the why. You can't just define it once and assume everyone gets it. You have to constantly remind people why you do what you do.
So it's an ongoing thing, not a one-time announcement.
Exactly. You have to weave it into the company culture, make it part of every decision, every meeting, everything.
I can see how that takes a lot of effort. It's not going to happen by accident.
Absolutely not. Another important thing is hiring people who believe in your why. It's not just about skills. It's about finding people who align with your purpose, your values.
So cultural fit is just as important as skills.
Absolutely. Look at Southwest Airlines. Their company culture is amazing, and it all stems from their why. A deep commitment to their employees' happiness.
Which leads to happy customers, right?
Exactly. Happy employees equal happy customers. It's a win-win.
It's a reminder that your employees are people, not just cogs in a machine.
And that brings us back to something we were talking about earlier, the limbic brain. You mentioned those gut feelings you get when making decisions.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Like sometimes I buy something and I just know it's right, even if I can't explain why.
That's your limbic brain at work. It processes information on an emotional level, and emotions are powerful drivers of our decisions.
So you're saying that companies that tap into those emotions are more likely to win us over?
Absolutely. It's why companies spend so much time trying to create emotional connections with customers. Those heartwarming commercials.
Oh, yeah, the ones that make you laugh or cry.
Or brands that align themselves with causes you care about. They're trying to create a sense of shared values, a feeling of belonging.
It's about more than just the product. It's about being part of something bigger.
Exactly. But how does all this translate into sales? It's one thing to make people feel good, but how do you get them to actually buy something?
Right. Good point.
Well, think back to the law of diffusion. Remember those early adopters? They're the ones who are passionate about your why, and they become your evangelists.
They spread the word.
Exactly. They tell their friends, their family, and it creates this ripple effect. As more and more people buy into your why, You reach that tipping point.
Where the idea takes off.
Yes. And suddenly, you're not just a niche company anymore, you're a movement.
So it's about creating a genuine movement of people who believe in your purpose.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've talked a lot about companies, but what about us as individuals? Can we apply this start with why stuff to our own lives?
Of course. It might even be more important for individuals. Finding your why is about figuring out what drives you, what gives your life meaning.
So it's like a personal mission statement.
It can be. It's about understanding your values, your passions, and using them to make a positive impact on the world.
I like that. It's not just about, traditional success. It's about living a life that feels meaningful.
Exactly. And that's something we'll dig into more in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, can't wait. But before we wrap up this part, we were talking about symbols earlier and how logos can be powerful.
Like the Harley-Davidson example.
Right. But what happens when companies use symbols in a way that's not authentic?
Oh, that can backfire big time.
How so?
Sinek gives the example of Volkswagen. They tried to launch a luxury car, the Phaeton, but it totally flopped. Why? Because Volkswagen is known for making affordable cars for everyday people.
Exactly. A luxury car just didn't align with their brand image, their why. People didn't buy it because it felt inauthentic.
It's like they were trying to be something they're not.
And consumers can see right through that.
So authenticity is key.
If you want to connect with people on a deeper level, you have to be true to yourself and your why.
Okay, this has been a jam-packed part 2. Before we move on, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from this part of our dive into Start with Why?
Remember that starting with why is not a one-time thing. It's a continuous process. You have to constantly reinforce your why, make sure it's reflected in everything you do, and be willing to adapt as you grow and evolve.
It's not just about finding your why, it's about living it every single day.
Exactly. And that's where the magic happens.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Start with Why. It's our final part, and we've covered a lot of ground so far.
Yeah, we've talked about the golden circle, those emotional decisions we make, companies losing their way, even Harley tattoos.
It's been a wild ride. But before we wrap things up, we've talked a lot about companies and how they use this whole Start with Why thing. But what about us, like regular people?
Right. It's just as important, if not more so, for individuals to find their why.
Okay, so how do we do that? What does it actually mean to find your why?
It's all about figuring out what truly motivates you, what gets you excited, what gives your life meaning.
It's more than just setting goals, right?
Absolutely. It's deeper than that. It's
Yeah.
about discovering those core values and beliefs that drive you.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you have two people who both want to be entrepreneurs. One is driven by making a lot of money, while the other is passionate about solving a specific problem in the world.
So their goals might look similar on the surface, but
Their motivations are completely different.
and those different motivations will change how they do things.
Exactly. It affects the types of businesses they create, the decisions they make, everything.
So someone who just wants money, they might be more likely to cut corners or compromise their values.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Because their main focus is profit. But the person driven by purpose, they might be more willing to take risks or even make less money if it means staying true to their mission.
Because their why is bigger than just money. So how do we actually find our why? Is there a step-by-step guide or something?
Sinek provides some frameworks, but it's really an introspective journey. You got to ask yourself some tough questions.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, what makes you feel truly alive? What brings you joy? What injustices in the world make you angry? What problems do you feel compelled to solve?
It's about tapping into what makes you tick, what really matters to you.
Exactly. Once you've figured out those things, you can start to articulate your why.
Put it into words.
Yeah, it could be a sentence, a paragraph, even a whole page. The important thing is that it feels authentic to you.
Okay, let's say you found your why. Now what? How do you actually use it in your life?
Well, that's where it gets really exciting. You use your why as a guiding principle for all your decisions, big or small.
It's like a filter for your life.
That's a great way to put it. When you have to make a choice, you can ask yourself, does this align with my why? If it does, you know you're on the right track.
That's a powerful tool. But, it's probably not always easy to stay true to your why, right? There's always pressure and temptations to do things differently.
Oh, absolutely. It takes courage and discipline to live a life that aligns with your purpose. But the rewards are huge.
How so?
When you live in alignment with your why, you feel this sense of clarity, energy, and fulfillment. And you can't really get that any other way.
That makes sense. We've talked a lot about achievement and success throughout this deep dive. Is finding your why really the key to those things?
I think it's a big part of it, yeah. But it's important to understand what those words mean. Achievement is about hitting those external benchmarks, like getting a promotion or launching a successful business.
The stuff you can put on your resume.
Right. But success is more of an internal feeling. It's about satisfaction and fulfillment.
It's about feeling good about yourself and what you're doing.
Exactly. And finding your why can lead to both. When you're driven by purpose, you're more likely to achieve those external goals and feel truly satisfied with your life.
Wow. This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of start with why, but even so, I'm walking away with so much to think about.
Me too. Sinek really challenges us to think differently about how we approach our lives and our work.
So as we wrap up this final part, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away from our exploration of Start With Why?
More than anything, I hope they feel inspired to find their own why, to ask themselves those tough questions, to get curious about what truly motivates them and start making choices that align with their purpose.
And even if you haven't quite figured out your why yet, don't stop searching. It's a journey, and the process of exploring is just as important as the destination.
Well said.
So keep those brains buzzing, keep asking why, and keep striving to live a life that's true to you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Start With Why. We'll see you next time.